Welcome everyone to OnPodcast, the Microsoft podcast, where we're going to be talking about Apple stuff on a podcast. That's right, we're switching it up once again because we are coming toward the end of developer season with, I believe, the last of the big three. Now, again, there will be, I think Meta has its own developer conference and Amazon has its own as well. We probably won't be covering those, but we did like to cover the big three. And Apple just had their own developer conference. We are, I don't know, about 45 minutes out from it, and we have marinated on some thoughts. So we thought we'd bring them to you, as well as in the context of how any of what they've announced might affect Windows users. I am your host today, Kareem Anderson. I'm joined by
David Allen. We're back. We're doing apples instead of Windows this time, so we'll see how this turns out for you guys.
Yeah, unlike the Google one, we don't expect this one to run too long, so we're just going to jump straight into it. We'll save the best for last, as like Apple did, for what we talk about the most, just like Apple did. So we'll do some quick rundowns. They introduced a 15-inch MacBook Air, which I believe they said is about 11.5 millimeters thin, which they say is the thinnest 15-inch laptop out. That's debatable. We will see once people start getting their hands on it. It looks like, design-wise, it's similar to the 13-inch. So it looks like the Air now has a 13-inch model and did they have a 14-inch, or is it just 13 and 15?
They did a 14 a few years ago. They don't have a current 14. They have a 14 Pro.
Okay, so now people who want Air-like prices, MacBook Air-like prices, can get a 15-inch, which I think the pricing starts at $999 now for the 13-inch, $1099 for a spec'd out one, and I believe starting price for this new 15-inch model is $1299, which, again, the reason why I want to talk about this in context of Microsoft is that Microsoft's, at least for a lot of OEMs, they are doing, I believe, 13.5, 13 inches, and then they jump straight to like 16. There's rarely a 14 or 15-inch model for most people. It's 13, 16, 17 if you're a gamer. We just got in the 17-inch Dell for review. It's a massive beast, but again, some people want, the medium-sized screen. What do you think about that?
I agree. I've got a Lenovo here, a 9i for review that's a 14.4, and I'm talking to you on a Lenovo, like you mentioned, gaming 16-inch. It used to be 10, 15 years ago. 15 was what everybody wanted. The resolutions just weren't there to make 14, work, especially if you had bad eyes. So I'm glad to see Apple moving the smaller model to the bigger screen, because for me, if I was buying a Mac, and I was a Mac user for many years, I'm going to call it what it is, that was what kept me from buying the MacBook Air and saving that money, because I was editing video. I felt like I needed that bigger screen to be able to do that effectively on the go. So I'm glad to see the MacBook Air specs and a 15-inch screen. I think, we are a Microsoft website. I think this will be a hit for Apple. Will it put some pressure on things like the Surface laptops, to adjust some of their specs and adjust some of their pricing? I hope it does, because we're kind of seeing the refresh phase of some of those. I would love to see Apple do well in selling those and put some pressure on some of these PC makers, Microsoft, Lenovo, Dell, Acer, Asus, MSI, to give us something better, to give us something cheaper, because spec-wise, doesn't look like a bad machine.
Yeah, agreed. Again, spec-wise, we have an M2 chip in there. We have a 15.3-inch liquid retina display. It weighs about 3.3 pounds. MagSafe charging port, two Thunderbolt ports, headphone jack. Comes in silver, midnight, and black, I believe. Has 6 speakers. They say it's about 18 hours battery life. It's fanless, just like the Air. So, again, to your point, I would like to see what the new design evolution of the Surface laptop is, because they do have it at 13 and 15. So we'll see if they maybe do another consolidation where they think its sweet spot is at 14, like they did with the Surface Laptop Studio, or if they continue 13 and 14 and we see some spec upgrades as far as the ports and stuff. The other thing they announced was the Mac Studio, which we think is relatively important. It's an M2 Ultra chip, which is basically whenever they up the ante on their chips, they basically just combine several versions of their previous chips. So the M2 is now, there's basically two M2s put together on a single die, It'll give you 76 cores of GPU performance and 192 gigabytes unified memory. They say you can pre-order it today. It'll be available next week. Again, these are the hardware portions of the presentation they kicked off with, which again, I think as a developer, as someone who might be in a recording studio, doing massive loads of CGI or graphics intensive production loads, these things are going to be great. I think they said they're also doing customizations for these things as far as being able to add more slots. So you can start, powering up to 6 of those, $5,000 monitors if they offered or something like that.
Apple Studios.
Yeah. So again, I'm looking forward to people getting their hands to try out that. I believe that one though starts at like $699. That's or $6,999. Yeah, it's about $7,000 to start off with those things.
Yeah, those are the what I call the PC Macs, where you get to. Which what's going to be interesting to me is how they handle the software part of that. That was something they skimmed over because so far the M1s have been what Apple allows you to plug into them, and they're saying with the new Pros that there's going to be, their PCI slots. I believe they said there was 8 slots, and
correct, yeah.
If you're going to be able to put PCI cards in there, they didn't mention anything about a list of compatible cards or what you would be able to put in there. They just kind of glossed over the fact that, yes, you can put PCI cards in there. They mentioned storage, video, etc., but no specifics. And I found it interesting that there was no OEM sitting there going, we have this new card for creators, programmers, or whatever, saying, look, this is compatible with the Mac Pro, and this is what you can do with it. That was unique to me because Apple usually, when they go out and do something big like this, they've got a demo with somebody sitting there ready to showcase it. And it bothered me when they didn't have that demo there showing one of the Pro machines full of PCI cards. Give me a demo. Show me what it can do, especially before I go invest. They didn't tell you what that $7,000 bought you either. It could be an 8 gig. It could be an 8 gig or 16 gig machine. And it goes up from there because the last Mac Pros were like that. You could get started for $5,000, but it wasn't anything you wanted necessarily.
Yeah. Who knows? This may be Apple's pivot into selling their own cards. You can expand them, but you can expand them with our stuff. Which may be why we didn't hear anything. Again, we are an hour out from the presentation. There will be more news to come, and we will, if warranted, we'll follow up on another website. Other places that we referred people to, like we were using some of this information from 9 to 5 Mac. Mac Rumors is another good spot to go. I believe will have all this kind of stuff for you guys as well. We're going to move on to the other announcement they had, which was iOS 17, which basically brings third-party apps into first-party experiences, it seems like. There wasn't a lot of custom-made features that were homegrown, it seems like, but they did introduce something called Journal. I'm trying to think of the most popular journal app on iOS. I don't use iOS, but I know there are some. And it basically, if you can imagine that, that's what it is. It basically takes your location data, photos you've taken for the day, anything that you've basically granted the app access to, and it will put it all in a collage and ask you, would you like to journal for that day? You can take that entire entry, save it, and say, hey, this is all the things I did for today. This is what I ate based on the photos I took and shared on Instagram. Here's where I was at based on my location. It'll give you suggestions, which is their big API. They didn't talk very much about AI. They talked about machine learning mostly. That was their like switch word for everything. So with this new suggestions API, that's basically their version of AI on board the device, where they will allow developers to tap into the suggestion thing, so you can have apps that will be part of this journaling suggestion experience. Oh, would you like to add Spotify, use the music from Spotify to journal for your day? Those are the other things. There was Standby, I believe, which was the new mode that you can put your phone in, basically turning it sideways and making it its own little display. Now, they didn't mention, they showed several demos of Standby and like a phone on a stand sideways. They didn't say how much the stand was going to be, or how the gyroscopes work. Like if you just turn your phone sideways, if you hold it for 5 seconds, does it go into that mode? They didn't explain that. But it looks like it might be MagSafe operated. So once you connect it to that stand, and it goes into this mode. So if you don't want to buy like what do they call the Nest cam or Nest monitor or whatever, you can turn your phone sideways while you're sleeping or when you're about to go to sleep, and it gives you all kinds of information as a Nest would. The other thing they talked about was sharing. Sharing was big on this. Maybe oversharing to some degree. What do you think about the sharing features that came in iOS?
I thought it was oversharing a little bit. They had the sharing in the car with music playlists. They had the improvements to AirDrop where you could just bring your devices close together and detect things. Now, and we're tech guys, folks, and this is what really caught my attention. When you're doing this in a controlled environment, that's a great thing. But when you're walking around a city or even in a mall at Christmas time, you're doing your shopping and you've got hundreds or thousands of, you know, iPhones around and they're all close together. We're walking in line. Are they dinging off? Hey, you can share with this person. You can share with that person. Do you want to share this? You know, we assume with the way Apple speaks that they are being secure about this. There is an assumption there that they're doing this. There's an assumption as to how this is going to work. If I'm doing this with my family at a party or a picnic, great. This sounds like a good idea, but I'm concerned about how does this work in a crowded environment where there's iOS devices galore, iOS aplenty. What
Yeah, there
happens there?
there were cases of people getting sent nudes on a plane just because so many people had, someone could tap into the share feature and just send out whatever they want to any iPhone devices. Obviously, I think, like you said, there are going to be some parameters in place, but there were also concerns I had immediately because it was, I believe one of the features was check-in. And I thought
Yes.
that that can go entirely wrong for people who are insecure and want to keep tabs on their significant others because it shares all kinds of crazy extra location data. It also prompts for notifications to remind people to have that other person check in. And so if you are a stalker-ish type
That's
of
where I was
X,
going with that.
this could be a feature that Apple may need to fine tune even further than what they showed in the demo.
And I don't want to just go too far. That the vibe that I got from this conference was that we all live and work a certain way. That we live and work, we share everything, we communicate everything, and that's somewhat true until that feature came up. It made me think, you know, there are people in this world that don't have good intentions, and breakups and things like that happen, divorces happen, and you know well, everything was good in the relationship and we were sharing things and somebody left. Well, I've still got access to my ex's phone. I'm going to sit right here and make their life miserable. Apple might need to think about that a little bit.
Yeah, I'm sure this is a trial and error, and they'll work it out hopefully before it becomes too big of an issue or too big of a headline. The other thing, I mean, some of the good things they had was the name drop thing, which I believe is part of the AirDrop update, where
Yeah,
you basically, it's again another third-party service where people used to use an app where you could like upload it on your phone, and it would give out your contact information like a business card. You can basically do it with your phone now. You can bump is what I think Android has a version of it. Basically, put your phones next to each other and share the information that you want to. So it'd be great for people who are networking or at conventions or anything like that. Instead of just having to stand by each other and repeat your phone number and they type it in and they spell your name correctly, you can send them a card that'll have your picture. If you want to share your email, share your phone number, share your socials or anything like that. So I think that's great. But again, mostly it was a lot of new sharing features. We move on to they talked about transformer models, which you and I both got a laugh out of when they were talking about their keyboard, of all things, and how they're using machine learning for predictive text and voice dictation. I think it's just an update to kind of what we've all seen from all versions of keyboards. The Gboard does this, SwiftKey does this. It isn't brand new. This isn't some kind of new modern tech. Um, I believe that sums up most of iOS, at least as far as we're concerned. There are some other things you can, like I said, go to these other more specialized websites to get information on. But for the whole of iOS, it was standby, sharing, and AirDrop were the big takeaways from that. There are some other customizations I think you can like add. You and I were talking about. You can send somebody the contact card you want to appear on their phone. We don't know if this is going to be the default. You and I had issues with this because I know what I would want to send somebody, but I also take time because I'm a fan of comics stuff like that, I give all my contacts a comic version of themselves on my phone, so it's easy for me to identify when they call me. I don't want them sending me something that they created because, again, it kind of disrupts the way I organize my phone. So what were your thoughts on that?
I think the person should be able to control it, first of all. I think, you know, Apple likes to set standards of how things are going to be. That's part of the Apple system. And I think you're going to get people, they're upset if Apple defines what cards you have to send. I know I have various levels of people in my life, the people that are close to me, the people I work with, and the people that I would necessarily consider an acquaintance. I might want to be able to send them different cards with different information, and I feel like I should be able to do that with Apple saying, look, you send them this card, maybe a work card, a personal card, and maybe somebody has an acquaintance card with a little bit of both in there. Maybe all you want to give out your phone number. Maybe you don't want to give out your actual phone number. Maybe you want to give out like a Skype number or a Google Voice number. I think there should be choices here as to what card each person gets.
Agreed, and we'll see. Well, maybe they'll make those tweaks before, because again, this is all stuff they're announcing now, but most of this will come when they get the new phone out in the end of September, beginning of October. Moving on, we have iPad OS, which was a widgets galore. They have tons of improvements for the widgets. They also introduced personalized wallpapers and pictures on the iPad lock screen, which we were saying kind of goes after the new Android tablet because it turns the iPad into kind of a smart screen, more of a smart screen than it has been before. There's live activities on the lock screen. At the bottom of your lock screen, you'll be able to keep up to date with sports scores, or if you're tracking, pizza or something like that. They also have multiple timers that show up on the lock screen. So that's all great. They added the health app on the iPad. So HealthKit
Finally.
is now, yes, HealthKit is now supported on the iPad. They added a new first-party PDF reading experience where you can sign stuff and save things. And basically, they're just kicking Adobe out of that section. There were some small, minor improvements to StageManner about how you can place certain things on the screen, but nothing fundamentally changes. Just they centered it a little bit more than they had before, but I think it was more left justified. But again, those are all iPad things. They wasn't a huge update. Then we moved over to their new operating system for this year, which is macOS Sonoma. And again, we are talking about widgets, which is why we brought in the context of Microsoft and Windows 11, because they're making a big play on widgets as well. The difference here is that while Microsoft puts it in the widget pane to the left of Windows, I guess right of your screen, Apple is moving theirs out of a widget pane and allowing you to pin it to the desktop. Now we know that there are plans, I don't know if they're coming to fruition, but there are plans to have pinnable widgets on Windows 11 desktop. We're seeing some features come to the widgets and third-party widgets coming as well. So, it seems like a widgets arms race between the companies. What do you think?
That was the one thing in the whole WWDC conference that I could say that I saw that maybe Apple's a little bit ahead of Microsoft was, widgets. Being able to place widgets anywhere you wanted to, being able to sync widgets between your devices. They did bring up, if you've got a widget on your cell phone, you will have access to that widget on your MacBook and vice versa. It was neat to see that. It was neat to see that the widgets would kind of fade themselves away a little bit. If you were needed to focus on something, like focus on an email, your widgets would kind of back off a little bit. It was neat to see that they do change when you change your backgrounds or the aesthetics of your screen, that the widgets do match. That, my thought there was somebody's got 4 or 5 widgets on their screen, you change the background and you have to go change each individual widget. That might be a little bit of a pain in the neck. So widgets is one thing I'm going to have to give Apple on this one. Okay, you're a little bit ahead of Microsoft because Apple is doing with widgets what I would love to see Microsoft do. I would love to be able to see a list of widgets in Windows, put them anywhere I want to, size them anywhere I want to, make them look any way I want to, and display the information that I choose.
Now, for those of you who are getting dashboard flashbacks, this is exactly what it looks like. We've come full circle with Apple and widgets. It looks like, again, and this is also in the demo, they showed a very clean background. I keep a very clean background, but my wife does not. And I think in the reality, most people do not. They have files spread across the background like it's a map of the world. And so it'll be interesting to see how those widgets interact with files everywhere as well.
I'm gonna have to say I'm looking at one of my machines here to the left, and there's not an icon on that desktop. So
As I'm
I
saying,
guess
mine's is very clear, and widgets will go great on mine. But if I look at my wife's, it is like I said, it looks like a crime scene where just papers tossed everywhere. I want to see a setup where you're having to basically maneuver your files around these widgets, or if you're clicking into like the widgets thinking you're clicking into a file because it's placed somewhere else on there. So, there's a place for it. There's a reality for it as well. We're gonna move on to they talked about gaming briefly, very briefly. We got everyone who is on a PC or uses Windows got a nice little chuckle out of this. They are bringing, I believe it is Death Stranding to, I think it's Director's Cut to macOS, first party, which is great. But as you and I mentioned, this is, a several-year-old game, and this seems to be the trend for Macs, where there's like, we finally got our first AAA title, and it's always 2 or 3 years removed. It's never, hey, this is upcoming, designed specifically for this platform, and everybody else is going to want it. It's like, if you've already played it on a PC, guess what? You can play it on a Mac as well years later. The other big thing about their gaming mode, they have a gaming mode, which is similar to game mode in Windows, where it basically ratchets it down all of the outside performances that are related to gaming. Specifically for the Mac OS Sonoma's gaming mode, it includes doubling the Bluetooth sampling rate to reduce input latency for Xbox and PlayStation controllers, as well as kind of making tweaks for the brightness of the screen and latency for the refresh rates on I guess the LED monitors that they have there. Then they talked about Safari, which is basically Safari finally recognizes the web apps, or PWAs, progressive web apps. They call it web apps themselves. So for those of you who want to save and get notifications from specific websites, as over a natural app, you can finally do that in Safari. There are font improvements. There are updates to WebKit, specifically for developers. There's private browsing, which locks the browser when not in use, which is kind of great. So you can't have apps adding cookies or anything on there after you've already started looking in there. There's passkey, which I believe is the same as, what is that, Microsoft Authenticator or whatever.
Authenticate. And something that caught me there, let's go back just 1 second on the sharing there. They were saying you could give people you trusted access to your passkey. To me, this kind of goes back to the first app we mentioned, the check-in. To me, that just screamed issues, because people are going to save important things in there: banking, insurance, financial, business, medical. We all save our passwords in something. So I don't know that I like, being able to necessarily share it and somebody having access to things that, if something was to go wrong, they make your life miserable.
Yeah, it's interesting that, that collaboration feature, because you can share passwords from Edge. It's a multi-step process, and I think it's there for your own security. Like, if I had Microsoft Authenticator generate some long strand and I wanted to share with my wife, I can go into my password section, and there's like a button that'll show you, allow you to show the password. You copy paste that and then share it on. I don't know if you necessarily need to collaborate in real time and share the same passwords and have access to it at all times, because as you said, if things were to go awry, or maybe this is just business oriented, maybe for a short time you and a contractor are creating something together in one app, and now it's time to move on. Who gets to break that chain and say, all right, I'm changing the password for the last time, you no longer have access to it? They didn't go into details about that. So we'll see how this works for businesses or people who are getting into business with somebody else and needing to share for a limited time, not for ongoing. Lastly, there were updates to, they had a section that was in there for AirPods and HomePods, which I called filler content. I didn't take too many notes on that. I don't know how this helps developers. But what it did lead into was a bigger thing, which is called AirPlay support in hotels, basically, which will allow hotels to support AirPlay and allow people to use a QR code to basically reinitiate their last AirPlay or Apple TV experience on the TV that's at the hotel. I know everyone was championing this, and I'm sure as iPhone users, this makes life super great. You don't have to like bring your Chromecast stick with you or anything like that. But I wonder, for hotels, what is the benefit for them? Because again, they put their ads in those TVs, like specifically for features of the hotel. They're giving that all up, and then people just bypass that. And I wonder what benefit they get out of this, or how much it's
Well,
going to start charging people, where
and
that
that's
cost
what I was
saving
going to
goes.
say. The cost of your room is going to go up because a lot of places put, you go for here, and I know, down where you are, you go to a beach, go to a hotel, and they've got advertisements that are events or things for you to see around the area that you're in, and those are paid for. Those are paid advertisements that that hotel or wherever is collecting money off of. So that may change the cost of your next room.
Yeah, and that's not what anybody's looking forward to. I mean, especially if it's just to get Apple TV, because I mean they have some great shows, but I think I will pass to save some money. Because again, you're at the hotel to go do something. You're not there to stay at the hotel. The next thing we got is again part of the Apple TV updates. You'll be able to control your home apps from the home screen. They've added FaceTime support for Apple TV as well. There's continuity APIs for Zoom and WebEx as well, so you can take conferences and meetings through your Apple TV. And again, all this is coming out later this year. There's a big section for WatchOS, which brings back widgets. They call them Smart Stack widgets. You're able to scroll through. They appear at about a third of the bottom of the screen. It's kind of a cool feature. Also, the mission that people are figuring out how to use their phones, so they can bring back these features that they thought were too robust in the beginning and too confusing. Now that people have had the watch for 5+ years, it seems like they're ready to bring back widgets everywhere. And then we're going to get into the last section. And this is the section that we want to talk particularly about because this is in relation to HoloLens. Apple finally took the veil off of their AR VR headset, which is called Apple Vision Pro. I want to start off by saying it's a wired headset. Go.
It's a wired headset that is $34.99, and let's go ahead and get the cat out of the bag. You won't be buying it this year. You can buy it next year, and from what we kind of could gather in the hour from the presentation, it is battery operated, as you mentioned. The battery is roughly 2 hours in length, but guess what? If you've got an open pocket or pocketbook, you can carry another battery and get yourself 2 more hours. So naturally, they did not say how much these batteries are going to cost you, and that was the thing with me. You know, it's $34.99. It's a cool product. Yes, I'll give them the cool factor. It's cool. It's neat. You could have most of your Apple experiences inside the headset without going into great detail. You could watch movies, bring them up room size. You could interact with your apps. But my question of many is if I'm going to pay $34.99 for the headset, I can go buy a well equipped Mac Pro or MacBook Pro of some sort for $34.99 and basically do the same things. Apple did not show me a reason to say, I need to put down my Mac. I need to go buy this headset. They didn't do that. And that's what got me. They showed me how to use their products inside the headset, how to interact with messages, how to interact with my browser, how to play Apple Arcade, how to look at my photos, how to enhance them. But that's all they did. They didn't say, you know, this is how you're going to do it when there's two headsets in a room, for example. They showed that you could watch a movie. So I guess one person in the family buys the headset and one person sits on the couch and stares at the headset while the family and the kids, do something else. To me, it was definitely a one person device that is marketed in a way, from what they've shown so far, that if somebody had it, a family would want to use it. Is that, I hope that's coming across well because if you go rent a movie on Apple TV or you go buy that movie, you know, They didn't even say, can one person watch it on the headset and the other people, someone else watch it on Apple TV? There's no sharing here. There's one experience. It's an expensive experience. And as you mentioned, there's not anything that they showed necessarily that we haven't seen on HoloLens, you know, years ago. So,
Yeah, no, it's just before we get too ahead of ourselves, just give people some idea of it. It's a fully 3D interface controlled with using your hands and your eyes and your voice. So no, there was rumors that somehow they would do gesture control based on your Apple Watch or maybe your phone. No, similar to HoloLens, you'll be using clickers with your fingers, resizing with your fingers as well. Use your voice to control certain things. You can move your eyes around because it has eye tracking, similar to HoloLens, and you can just start speaking if you're looking at a search box and it'll start bringing up certain things. When you first put on the app, you'll have a app interface. So it's not like Windows UI where you have the Windows desktop, but you'll have just kind of this. It's not a honeycomb as you saw on the Apple Watch, but it's similar where you'll just have apps in space that'll first show up. UI elements cast a shadow and they're freely full to space around your environment, similar to HoloLens, so you can kind of see distances and scale. You can place elements all around the room, and they have anchors, so they'll stay in place. New apps do not have to replace old ones; they just show up in a new space. So if you want, I don't know if it has an area of multiple instances, but maybe you'll have multiple browsers up or multiple Instagram accounts up if you are someone who works in social media. They introduced environments, which this is something that is new, that or I believe is relatively new, where you can basically immerse the background with an outdoor environment like a waterfall or a forest or something like that, where your apps will sit in front, but you will not have the AR pass through, so to speak. So, like I said, if you're looking at a browser, looking at Safari, and you want to be in a serene area, you can put an entire background of the forest behind it. They do have a knob at the top, I believe, which will allow you to ratchet up or down the amount of immersion you want. Now, we don't know if this is fully immersive. We don't know what the field of view is, those kind of things yet. We'll get into that in a second. But at least that's what they were showing. And as you mentioned, they do have, all the demos were singular uses. They do have this new feature, another new feature, where you can basically have your eyes digitally reflected on the outside of the device. So again, you can see there's a AR pass-through, so you can see the outside world to a certain degree. But people will not be able to see your natural eyes. They'll see a slightly enlarged version of your eyes facing outwards to kind of let people know that there's a context of you sort of looking at them, but not looking at them. It's a weird, uncanny valley between how that works. But those are basically the gist of it. If we had to describe it visually, I was mentioning in the chat that it looks like they took an Apple Watch and stretched it across your eyes. So it looks sleeker than some of the most headsets out there, but I said that they were able to be sleeker because they didn't have to pack a battery in like Magic Leap and HoloLens did.
Well, and two, the other thing that caught my attention near the end of the presentation for the headset, which really caught me off guard, when they were talking about it being available next year, they said you would be able to go to an Apple store for your fitting. That they mentioned a fitting specifically, but that's all they said, which made me think, where do they intend to sell this product? What is Apple's intention? And I would love for you guys to put it in the comments below. Some of you Apple fans that may tune in, put it in the comments below. Where does Apple sell this product? Because they showed consumer apps we use every day, whereas HoloLens, when they've done their demos, they show architecture. They show things that let you know that we're aiming this toward the business style of customer. Apple give it the consumer look with a $3,400 price tag, and then mentioned going to the Apple store for your fitting. So is Apple telling me when it does come out next year, that I can't go somewhere and press buy and it show up in a box and do its thing? What makes the fitting special?
In their defense, they did show their first party, at least the apps that they've been working tandem with app developers were all mostly enterprise. It was like a modeling
Right.
app where you can basically model a race car or something like that in real time. They had a manufacturing, like a supply chain line, automated mock-up as well. There were architecture ones. And this is a similar thing that HoloLens did. HoloLens tried to straddle the line because their first demo was of the Windows UI. The second demo was of Minecraft. The third window was of a Skype demonstration where you're like a plumber was helping somebody. And then they kind of veered off into mostly enterprise where it was, CAD and, other civil engineering apps, things like that, warehouse stockage and things like that. And they kind of, left the consumer aspect alone. Magic Leap came by and reinvigorated that by showing all kinds of movie-related demos that were super cool that, they weren't aiming towards enterprise. As we can see 5 years later, neither one of them materialized in anything that we can use as consumers. I say this all to say that Apple seems to be following both of these companies in the same direction. And I don't know if it's going to work out better for them somehow because, again, HoloLens announced, and it took them, 4 to 5 months before people can get headsets on that as well. They geared it towards enterprise, and then it kind of got forgotten. And as much as they showed, like, hey, you can open up, several versions of your Windows desktop UI sitting down on your couch or whatever, it never became a product people were using Windows for.
And I think that's going to be the other issue because I try to put myself when I was watching this into the buyer's seat because ultimately that's what Apple wants is you to sit in the buyer's seat. Like you mentioned, could I see modelers possibly buying it? Sure, if the software support is there. Could I see engineers buying it? Sure, if the software support is there. Just like if the software support is there for the HoloLens, then I suspect that people are going to make the choice. But as another website had tweeted, the tweet that you showed me, at the time of the announcement, the stock market, the stock price of Apple didn't go too well. So
Yeah, our buddy Dan Rubino over at Windows Central put together side by side of the hourly change in stock prices and over the year, and you saw at a certain point, Apple was high up year over year, and then it started to go down. And if you zoomed in at the hourly, at about 2 o'clock, about an hour in, right around when they started describing their AR headset, the stock started to go down. The stock was going up when hardware was the key, laptops, phones, watches, things of that nature that people can get their hands on that find tangible uses for. We're all getting updates and all getting improvements, and the investors like, this is great. Then you introduce this aspirational headset that has historically not worked out for most people, Meta included. And now you're saying, here's our version of it, and you haven't done anything that's wildly different. You talked about an hour, and your presentation, I'm referring to you as Apple, was no different than when HoloLens did it 5 years ago. I mean, aside from maybe perhaps the crown, which gives you sort of the immersive view, and if those of you who are Windows fans or Microsoft fans, just imagine the dial on the Surface dial where you can kind of ratchet up the ambient noise or put up the noise canceling. That's basically what their field of view, their vision thing does. Now, they also didn't address most of the big concerns, which I believe are field of view, because even if they were to come out at this price, say this thing is $1,500, people, if they get the same sort of field of view that HoloLens did, they're going to have the same sort of issues where people get nauseous or they just get burnt out. Their eyes get exhausted because they're taking in input peripherally of the real world and trying to focus on things in high fidelity in front of them. So they didn't mention any of that. We'll probably get some hands-on from people in the next 48 hours or so that can attest to that. But in every demo that anyone's ever done for AR, it's always immersive. It's always, you can't see anything outside of your field of view, and that's what makes the AR experience supposed to be that great. But in reality, it's always, it's in between your ears, and you can see everything else outside of it. And that's why most people don't want to wear it for more than, an hour or two at a time, because it's straining on the eyes. And then the opposite is the same with VR, where you're isolated. and you're closed off from the world. And again, you don't want to do that for too long because some people, get socially and physically claustrophobic. You can't see what's going on. You don't know what's going on. So the fact that you can dial this immersive thing may still be too stimulating for people. So they got to address that. We know what the price. We know it's mostly for developers. It's not coming out till next year, which by that point, I'm sure next WWDC they'll be talking about version 2. So if you bought one in January, you're going to be very upset come June, where there's another one already, in the wings waiting to come out right around the same time as the Apple phone or whatever in that year, September. So at the end of the day, go ahead.
They also didn't address, unless I missed it, they were talking about a lot of stuff there. Any storage, how much storage is on the device? Can it connect to your MacBook? Can it connect to your Mac Studio? That they showed it as a fully stand. Now, correct me if you saw something I didn't, but everything I saw was fully standalone. The headset is its own beast and does its own thing. So, it's going to be interesting to see when it comes out and you can go buy it. If there's nothing new you can do on it, why buy it?
Well, the other thing they also kind of brushed over was that there's vents on it on the front of the device, right around the eye part area. So you might have some hot, some heated air circulating right around your cheeks, your nose area, stuff like that too. So again, they showed the demo of people wearing these things all day. I doubt people are going to want to do that. The experiences aren't any different so far than what we've already come to experience. Even their gaming demo was basically someone holding a controller and looking at the, a screen versus like what we at least saw with the Minecraft, where it was like on a table and you were interacting in 3D elements with that kind of thing. So there's, I believe, for anybody who knows about or has experienced the metaverse, whatever the Oculus is, or whatever version is out now, who's a very experienced Magic Leap, who has had time with HoloLens, you were probably a little bit bored by this announcement. Maybe the design catches you. The pricing definitely isn't, because I believe it's $500 more than the current HoloLens is. I don't know what new experiences they plan to capture with this thing. They had, Disney come out, and they always drag Disney out whenever they talk about AR, things like that. I don't think anything that Bob Iger's mentioned was any different than what you can do with an iPad currently. So a lot of questions, but we have 6 months to kind of, Apple has 6 months to iron those out before they start getting in the hands of people. We'll see how the controlled demos go the next 48 hours and what people say about that.
And don't forget it. That was something I want to throw in here then. Don't forget it, because it's 6 months before we can even touch it. And I know I sound like I'm just dogging this thing out of the water, but it makes no sense to me to do your presentation and your PR spin up now, only to 4 to 6 months from now, you're going to have to restart that whole PR wheel again, get people interested, and possibly do another demo presentation and try to change the minds that have already looked at it and said, it's not any different. I don't want any part of it. I would have rather seen a demo late 2023, early 2024 with something saying you can order today, it'll be in your, it'll be on your doorstep or whatever within 30 days.
I mean, as a developer, I'd rather than just wait until next year when they could say, hey, you can get your hands on this today and start working on all the things we just talked about. Because again, they're going to have these sessions where they're talking about this device and there's nothing anybody can do about it. You can't write apps to it because there's no store yet. You don't have access to play around with the gyroscopes to see how you're going to create an app that works with this. Like, you don't have hands-on with it. You won't have hands-on with it for another 6 months. Like, why introduce this to developers? Again, I understand, as someone who's rational, this is not for consumers. I get that. I grant them that. But it's not for developers for the next 6 months. Why even start talking about it if they can't get their hands on it? And again, this isn't like HoloLens, where you can tell people, all right, well, if you are in the Windows environment, you can go to Windows and start just taking your Windows Store apps using these dimensions that we're talking about and all of the APIs and start transferring your app, which will show up on the HoloLens whenever you get it as this version. This is a new operating system for them. Like, no one has access to this new version of whatever this app store is or however these dimensions work for this thing. So they can't write to that just yet. I'm interested to see how they plan to ramp up the apps by next year, I guess.
Yeah, I guess we'll find out sometime Christmas of this year or New Year's what their plan is. Now, I've always been an Apple supporter. Like I said, I was an Apple user for over 10 years. This is the first product that they have come out with since I don't know, I can't go back that far. But it's the first product they've come out with in the past 10 years where I look at it and go, this might fail. I don't want to put I don't want to put, go completely down the negative road. We don't have it in hand yet. But based on what I saw today, could this be the first Apple product that fails? And let me define what fail is. Fail for Microsoft is different from fail from Apple expectations. I'm thinking this may be the first product that fails Apple's expectations.
Yeah, this seems like a product out of time. Had they announced this 2 years ago, I'm sure we'd all be in a different mindset. But things have changed, times have changed, people's perspectives have changed. Most companies are focusing on the cloud and AI, and Apple's focusing on hardware and AR and VR. We will see how that all works out for everybody, but we want to thank you all for joining us for this special podcast where we get to rant about Apple stuff. And hopefully, for those of us who are in tech, just be optimistic about how the watershed effects can affect everybody. Maybe Microsoft sees this as a reason to give Panos the go-ahead for HoloLens 3 at some point. That could be our best outcome of this whole situation.
Apple usually does affect how other people spend things. And, like you said, give it some time. We may see Microsoft do something. We may see another company do something. Apple may be what gets AR and VR kind of the kick in the butt to, hey, let's do something with it. I mean, they did that with the M1 series chip. The M1 series chips come out, and everybody went, "Whoa, they're power efficient and powerful." So look what we've gotten from Intel and AMD since those come out. We may get something interesting in the AR VR space from someone else because of Apple.
Fingers crossed. Until then, where can people find you?
David PAJ1978 on the Twitters, and we can talk about Apple, bash Apple, whatever we need to do.
Yeah, you can find me at MyNet1 on Twitter as well, where I will be joining the Paul Throts of the world with all my snarkiness for Apple things, but also quietly optimistic about it. Again, we want to thank you guys. We will be back the rest of this week with actual Microsoft news, so this isn't the only thing you get for the week. But thank you for indulging us in our fancy to kind of cover Apple as well.
Thanks, guys. See you later this week.
Bye.